Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alex, and as Saul said, I'm a millennial. What does that mean? Well, it means basically that I grew up digital, that I was bathed in bits. I'm a digital native. But in the spirit of BIF, I'd like to make a confession, which is that I'm a very old millennial. In fact, I'm so old, I actually remember a time before the internet. And I remember distinctly the first time actually that I went online. As well, we heard yesterday about how early experiences can be formative in someone's upbringing. I was about 7 years old. I was playing in my room, probably building a spaceship out of Lego. That's what kids used to do before technology. And my dad came rushing into the room. He said, Alex, I've got something to show you. You're going to love it. I said, really? He said, yeah, come downstairs. So I was 7 years old. Oh boy, this is great. So I ran down the stairs. I was expecting a puppy or a bicycle or something like that. And he sits me down in front of the computer. And like I wasn't new to technology. I'd spent time using computers before in the past. And I said, what am I looking at? He said, just look at the screen. And slowly but surely, and anybody who remembers going on Mosaic in '94 remembers this, line by line, brrr, brrr, brrr. About 3 minutes later, an image appeared. It was Mr. Potato Head. So I was, I think I was a little old for Mr. Potato Head, but my dad was trying to tell me, show me something interesting. So I said, wow, that's really cool. Like, can you play with him? Does he do anything? He said, no, but look, you can go onto the computer and find Mr. Potato Head. So I'm thinking like, all right, well, this isn't that interesting, but I'll give it a shot. So I go on the computer and I start fiddling around online. And that was my first time on the internet. And I was hooked. I became net addicted, as they said. And people my generation grew up using the internet. And I think saw the potential of what the first generation of the internet was capable of long before many others. So that was 21 years ago. Who here has heard of the blockchain? Just a show of hands really quickly. Okay, so I'd say that's about a quarter. It's interesting, I asked this question 3 months ago to an audience, and I got probably fewer than 10%. So either the BIF crowd's way ahead of the curve, or I might be onto something with this. Let's hope it's a little bit of both. So until 6 months ago, I was working in investment banking. Oh, good. I was expecting a boo. What a relief. And I was living a comfortable life. I had great career prospects. I was on the executive fast track at my firm. But it wasn't the life that I always aspired to. It wasn't a principled life of consequence. That was something that I'd always been taught from a young age. My dad has always been my mentor and my role model, and my mom as well. And those were things that they always instilled in me. And so I decided, basically, enough. I'm going to quit. So I quit. And actually, it was largely because of my journey into looking into the blockchain, which began years ago with the cryptocurrency Bitcoin, which is where this technology originates from, and also some work I had done at the University of Toronto, that led me to the conclusion, with the right type of leadership, this technology could be used to sweep away business models, to connect people globally, and to potentially usher in an era of prosperity that we've yet to see in history. Coincidentally, my dad was also looking into blockchain technology. He knew that I'd been spending some time on it over the past couple of years. And he's generally got a knack for spotting the next big thing. He said, I've got an idea for you, a little father-son bonding exercise. What do you say we write a book? And I said, gee, well, that's kind of interesting. I've written papers and articles before in the past. I think the longest thing I've ever written was my undergrad thesis at Amherst College 10 years ago. And I assure you it wasn't a work of great literary genius. But it was kind of an offer I couldn't refuse, right? A chance to dig into this thing I was passionate about, this technology I thought could change the world, and an opportunity to bond with my dad. Most people go to the ball game or hit the driving range. We decided to write a book. So the internet today connects billions of people around the world. It's great for accessing and sharing information, for communicating, and for collaborating, but it's actually not that good for business. The old joke from the early internet days, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog, actually turned out to be true, at least for business. Determining identity and establishing trust between two parties online continues to be a really thorny problem. So as a result, we rely on middlemen to authenticate identity, to establish trust, and to perform the business logic and transaction logic of commerce. What that means is that intermediaries like banks, like governments, PayPal, Visa, and digital conglomerates like Google, Facebook, Uber, and others are sitting in the middle capturing a lot of the value. So sure, the internet's great for accessing information online, but the reality is for a lot of people, it's cheaper and faster to send an anvil to China than it is to send $100. This is a big problem. So what blockchain does, basically, in the same sense that internet democratized information, blockchain democratizes value. So what does that mean? Well, for the first time in human history, two parties need not know nor trust each other to enter into a transaction or do business. Instead of an intermediary establishing identity and establishing trust, a network of participants, each acting in their own collective self-interest, does it instead. Trust is baked into the technology, which is why we call blockchain the trust protocol. Taken one step further, it takes all the business logic and the transaction logic from big institutions and pushes it down into the network level. So blockchain not only becomes this powerful platform, a database running on billions of devices that's purpose-built for money and value, but also for creating contracts, for conducting business, for communicating, and for conducting our affairs. We believe, if we do this right, that this technology could usher in an era of prosperity that we have yet to see in humanity. So, admittedly, that's a really big statement. And it's no surprise that a lot of big CEOs and executives at big banks are looking at blockchain technology as the next big thing. Of course, they get a little ahead of their skis, and this is usually the kind of conversation that happens. So the pointy-haired executive says, I think we should build a blockchain. Dilbert, oh God. Does he understand what he said, or is it something he saw in a magazine ad? What color do you want your blockchain? I think mauve has the most RAM. So for those of you who don't get it, it doesn't make any sense. So, and actually, Dilbert's a pretty good harbinger of big technological change. There are examples before in the past where technologies that have been unknown have come into existence. This is the funniest Dilbert cartoon of all time. Okay, so blockchain started with Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency and peer-to-peer payment network. Bitcoin is great. It basically proved that this could work and it unleashed the innovation that we're seeing today. But Bitcoin is only the start. Bitcoin is to blockchain what email was to the internet. It was the first useful application. Even in 1994, when I was going online looking at Mr. Potato Head, email was 60% of all internet traffic. So we're actually probably 1 to 2 years away from getting to that Mr. Potato Head moment, which again was years before most people got online. So what that means is that it's early. But that doesn't mean we can't think about some of the possibilities with this technology. So I'm assuming a lot of people here, most people are from out of town. Who's from out of town? So maybe you're staying in a hotel. Maybe you're staying in a room that you found on Airbnb. We heard yesterday from Robin Chase about Airbnb, Uber, Lyft, TaskRabbit, and others. These are examples of sharing economy companies. The sharing economy, one of those words that seems to have come out of nowhere to quickly enter the vernacular. I've read Robin's book, and I think it's brilliant, and I think the sharing economy could potentially change a lot of things and create all sorts of good in society. But I challenge the notion that a lot of those particular companies that I mentioned are actually sharing economy companies. What Uber, what Lyft, what Airbnb do is they aggregate excess capacity, right? We heard that yesterday, through a centralized platform and then resell it, in the process collecting reams and reams and reams of data about their users, which they can then use for future commercial exploitation. Reselling the data, advertising, targeted ads, things like that. Instead of Airbnb, the $25 billion Silicon Valley darling super unicorn, as it's called, let's imagine something else. A user-generated application, an open source application that's run on the blockchain. It's called Airbnb, blockchain Airbnb. So it looks just as good as Airbnb. It runs just as smoothly as Airbnb. There are tons of examples of open source software that looks better and runs better than anything that's built by a company. But this time, if you're looking for a listing, Airbnb searches through the blockchain to find any of all the listings that would meet your criteria and fits you with the right one. You don't need an intermediary to establish trust and identity between the parties. The trust is established by your reputation, which is a combination of a few things. Number one, your history, your transaction history using the application as part of the ledger that exists within the system. Number two, reputation scores based on what other users in the system might think of you and how, whether or not you act with integrity, whether or not you abide by your commitments, whether or not you trash the room or not. The third thing would be other social and economic attributes which you can volunteer. The important part is that that data doesn't exist in a centralized server, and it's also not out in the open. It's encrypted, but it can be used to score how trustworthy you are and establish trust between two parties. The big thing that we heard today from Mark Goodman was about cybercrime and hacking. There's examples between Target, JP Morgan, the bank heist of $1 billion. The more centralized data is, the more vulnerable it is to attack. And so what happens with Airbnb is that your data sits on Airbnb servers. It sits on the computers of owners of the homes that are part of the system. Those create these central points of attack. On Airbnb, there is no centralized point of attack. Everything is distributed, and the only data is encrypted transactions which people can't access. Payments. If you travel abroad and you use Airbnb, you're paying interchange, you're paying foreign exchange, you might be paying some other hidden fees you don't know about. If everything is settled on blockchain payment rails, then the cost of doing business is basically free. It happens instantaneously, and there's no middlemen. The final point, which I think is the most interesting about this hypothetical, is that if you look at who owns the value that's created, if it was a distributed application and all the participants were the ones creating the value, there would be a way, legitimately, for the people who actually create the value to own the value in the company. That's the real sharing economy as I see it, and that's the future with blockchain technology. So what else could be disrupted by this? Well, a lot of people think that the entire financial services system is up for grabs, and certainly there are a lot of examples of that. But this isn't all about business. Consider the Haiti earthquake in 2010. Somewhere between 100 and 300,000 people died in that attack, during that crisis. The government was completely unable to respond to the devastation. Fortunately, the international community rushed to Haiti's aid. The Red Cross alone raised $500 million in a few weeks to deliver aid, to deliver clean water, medicine, and also to build 130,000 homes in Haiti. The only problem was because of corruption within government, mismanagement within the Red Cross, issues on the ground, and a host of other problems, including a land title registry in Haiti, which was in utter shambles. They didn't build 130,000 houses. They built 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 houses. So how can blockchain, this concept, be applied to foreign aid? Well, number one, middlemen, going back to middlemen. So there's a lot of academic research that suggests that foreign aid actually exacerbates problems in the countries where it's delivered. How could this be? Well, one of the reasons that's often cited is because there are corrupt officials within government who receive the aid and then decide to keep it all for themselves. And that exacerbates social tension and other social and economic issues in the country. It never actually reaches a lot of the poor people. So let's think of an alternative scenario. UNICEF wants to deliver funds to orphanages around the world, but they don't want to go through the banking system or whatever other intermediary or middleman there might be in those countries. So here's what they do. They set up every kid in the orphanage with a wallet. That wallet has a private key and a public key. The private key is only known by the kids themselves. Individual donors like all of you sponsor a kid overseas. You donate money directly to that wallet. When they come of age, at the age of 16, 18 years old, maybe after completing education, the funds get released from escrow only when they use their private key to access it. You completely disintermediate the corrupt and inefficient banking systems within a lot of countries, and you keep the money out of the hands of the people who are going to take it from the kids. This is a very powerful concept, and it could be applied. In fact, UNICEF actually is working with blockchain technology now to put these ideas into motion. The second thing is accountability. Let's go back to the Red Cross. What if every donation you made through an SMS message or through your smartphone could be tracked from the moment it leaves your device to whatever it's ultimately spent on? A plank of wood, a gallon of water, a gauze bandage, a piece of metal that goes into a home, whatever it might be. you'd be able to track whether or not the funds you delivered to that organization were actually used for good or not for good. You say you're going to build 130,000 houses. Great idea. We're going to put those funds into an escrow account, and they're going to be released upon the completion of a certain set of milestones. You sourcing the land title, sourcing a contractor, delivery of raw materials, and delivery of the finished product. And you're not going to get those funds until you've completed those different assignments as part of this value chain. That's the kind of power and control, transparency and accountability that can be created. To the Red Cross's fairness, the reason they couldn't build in Haiti is because the land title registry, like I said, was in utter shambles. No one knew who owed what to whom, who owned what title the land was under. This is a big problem in the developing world. In Honduras, the most recent president was actually ousted from power for expropriating land that was embroiled in these murky title disputes and handing it over to all of his buddies in government. It caused a great uprising, and he was kicked out. Now the government of Honduras is working with a US-based company called Factum to create a digital asset registry using blockchain technology so they can use the same immutability, the same permanence of blockchain to explain clearly who owes what and who owns what, and therefore give some economic security to poor people in need. So does anybody know what the biggest source of funds is in the developing world? It's not foreign aid. It's not direct foreign investment. It's remittances, money that flows from diasporas overseas into their home countries. So a woman I know, her name's Annalie Domingo. She's 52 years old. I know her really well because 25 years ago she was my nanny. And she's been sending money without fail to Manila for the entire time that she's been in Canada. I was curious to know how she did it because I've been studying remittances for the book. And so I asked if I could tag along, and she graciously said yes. So here's how it works. She gets the money from her current employer. She takes it to the bank. She deposits it, and then she withdraws cash. Then we get in a bus. We go to a poor part or to a bad part of town, which is the opposite direction of where she lives. We go to a convenience store, which doubles as a Western Union agent. It's paydays, so there are 30 other people that have the same idea. They're all waiting in line. We wait for about an hour. Then we get to the counter. She fills out paperwork like she has a million times before, hands over the money, and it goes into the system. 7 days later, her 75-year-old grandmother in Manila receives the money, but not before Annalie has paid a $10 flat rate, that's 5%, plus exchange rate fees and other hidden fees that go into that process. There's a better way to do this, and it's possible with blockchain. There's a US-based company called Abra, and I'm only choosing them because I know them well, but they're not unique. There are hundreds like them that are doing this. Basically, they want to turn every single person in the world into their own bank teller. Here's how it would work. Annalie's boss would directly send the funds to her account. She would beam them to her mother. She would have Canadian dollars in her bank account. Her mother would receive Filipino pesos. There would be no interchange fee. There would be no foreign exchange fee. It would take 10 seconds instead of taking 7 days. But mom wants cash. She goes to the market. She buys her groceries in cash. And so she goes onto the app and sees that there are 10 other Abra tellers in the area who are prepared to swap her 6,000 pesos of virtual pesos for 6,000 physical pesos. She finds one that's got a 5 out of 5 rating, someone who's willing to do it for 1.5%. They meet halfway, they swap the funds, deal's done. The whole thing takes about 90 minutes, costs, in this example, 1.5%. But if Annalie had been a teller on the front end, it would be a flat trade, versus 7 to 10% and taking a week and causing a whole bunch of hassle. So there are a lot of opportunities within financial services for this. This is one that directly addresses a huge pain point for some of the world's poorest people, and I think it's one that's really, really important. These are 3 examples of hundreds of opportunities using this technology that we're looking at for our book, The Trust Protocol, which is coming out in April 2016. I'll finish with one thing, which is that blockchain technology is not a panacea for the world's problems. We've heard from a lot of great people about how technology is a tool. Technology is a tool that can be used for good, it can be used for evil. I think on balance, the trajectory of humanity has been one where technology has made things for the better, but that's not always the case. What's needed here is leadership. It took great leaders to make the internet what it is today. We think of it as this open source thing, but really it was a multi-stakeholder effort of governments, of the private sector, of technologists, of NGOs and civil society organizations, and individual leaders like all of you. I hope that you'll check it out. We believe the opportunity here is historic. Please join us. Thank you very much.